Hello and welcome to this next episode of Emily Talks Tech Jobs. I am so excited today to be joined by Holly Heath, an analytics consultant and data-driven leader with a fascinating career pivot. Holly co-founded SpaceShake, where her work landed the brand on Shark Tank and into partnerships with Coca-Cola before transitioning into analytics consulting. She now helps organizations optimize and uncover insights with data, drawing on more than 15 years of experience in brand building and operational excellence. So I am excited to dive into her story of career transformation and hear her advice for others who are navigating big pivots. Holly, thank you so much for being here today and welcome.
Thanks, Emily. I'm so happy to be here.
Good.
Yeah,
Awesome. So yeah, your story is a really interesting one, and I would like to hear it from you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about the career path that you've gone down, and what led you to pivot later in life.
sure. Yeah. So I've worn quite a few hats over the years. But I think that the common theme has always been solving problems and finding clarity in chaos, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I did recently pivot, or I like to say transitioned, into data analytics, and I work as an analytics consultant. I actually love connecting the dots between people, ideas, and data. I spend a lot of my time digging into data and helping clients make better decisions with it. So I'll kind of go back to college actually, which kind of stems from a lot of more creative background. So I have a bachelor in fine arts with an emphasis in photography and painting. But I didn't really start there. So when I was a freshman, I was actually an accounting major, which lasted for about a month. And then I realized that probably wasn't my career path. I did that for one semester and then I transitioned more into actually kind of construction engineering
Mm,
and sort of industrial design. So that led more towards design aspects. And I finally graduated with fine arts. I found later in my sophomore, junior year that painting was not only relaxing, but I was pretty good at it. And not even realistic painting, is more abstract painting.
mm,
And then I used photography, and within photography, we also did some graphic design. So this is quite a while ago.
mm-hmm.
So it was a first touch into computers and creativity with computers, and design. And then I found that sort of led to me wanting to be very creative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where my passion lied. So from there, I started as a graphic designer, and slowly moved more into management. So I then became a project manager.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I kind of hit my limit in learning. I always feel like I need to be learning. Otherwise, like, life just isn't exciting for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got an opportunity to start a brand, Space Shake, with my best friend. So that kind of led down my entrepreneur spirit and kind of made me learn a lot about
Mm-hmm.
myself, a lot about business, a lot about creativity again, a lot about being agile and nimble.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so within that little stint of my career, I kind of sat back one day and I was like, what have I liked over the last 15, 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
And it all kind of stems back to data and figuring out how things work, why they work, and using numbers to kind of facilitate that.
Mm-hmm.
So my next transition was kind of just researching data analysts, data science, even, just going within the tech space. Like I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I had learned so much the last 20 years within my career and the different hats that I had worn that I essentially didn't feel I was in the right work day-to-day environment. And so
Mhm.
I actually decided that I was gonna take a boot camp to learn more technical skills and
Mhm.
to really start understanding, like, where data came from, how to use it the best, the upstreams, the downstreams, and understand those a little better. I had just been using Excel for my entire life, which I I think it's the easiest thing to use to explore data, right? But there's also
Right.
better ways to do it with better technology that's available today. So,
Mhm.
I tried to learn on my own. That wasn't quite as easy. So I did throw myself in a 3-month boot camp that was nonstop. I probably spent 50 to 60 hours a week,
Wow.
um, just learning and understanding new technology today. So, uh, yeah, that okay.
Yeah. I really wanna hear about your more recent pivot. So you did the boot camp, and then you ended up, actually landing your role in data. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I had connected with you
Mhm.
actually because I was looking for a new job within this new space that I had learned. And I had looked for a job myself on my own, and I just wasn't finding the right things. And I also probably had a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of imposter syndrome. I
Mm.
didn't understand and realize all the experience I had gained like the last 20 years.
Right.
So, when I connected with you, and we decided to work together, I think that was one of the top things that you and first things that you kind of just tried to get in my little head is that the experience that I had was not gone,
Right.
right? It
Mhm.
was just I needed to realize how to talk about my experience in a way that fits within data analytics and
Awesome.
this new life I wanted to pursue.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember that because, all especially when you like ran your own company
Mhm,
and
mhm.
you were the analytics person.
Yeah.
You ran the numbers. So, yeah, so I remember that it was a little bit of a journey to get to the bottom of all of the applicable stuff that you had done, in your career up until then. And ultimately,
Yeah.
you ended up landing a role that you're really happy with. And if I recall, you had some great interviews along the way too.
I did. Yeah, I had a scary interview, if you remember.
You did. I remember that. Horror stories.
Yes. And I got a second interview and you were like, "I think you should do," and I was like, "What?" Yeah. So I think my most recent role, and I'm so happy, that I waited and, um it's almost like the stars aligned. I did have an internal reference, and I think that helped me at least get the interview. Obviously, I think my interview got me the job, but
Right.
at this point, I get to like dive into complex data sets, and I'm translating them into strategies. Um, what I do is never repetitive, to be honest. As
Mhm.
a consultant, it's interesting because I really like that client aspect. I really like interacting with the client. So I didn't want to be one of those people who just sits behind a computer and is crunching numbers, essentially.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I found the perfect fit. I'm really happy. Great team, great people. And I can see that they're doing like changes that actually make a difference. They're like, they're government focused. And so they do create like more prosperous communities, safer, healthier
Mm.
communities. And I always have been that kind of person. Like, I definitely want to make an impact. When I go back to like my entrepreneurship and launching Space Shake, it was to help people. And like, that was
Mhm.
one of the driving factors that kind of made me want to step out and leave a very secure job, transfer into this entrepreneurship world. And yeah, we can talk about that later. But I, um, yeah,
Well, why don't we talk about that right now? So, I mean, this was probably one of the more interesting, paths that I've seen kind of come through my pipeline. I mean, like you said, you started out with that very creative background, ended up going into entrepreneurship. And of course, like everybody wants to know about, the people who like land a deal on Shark Tank. So,
Yeah.
so can you tell us a little bit about your experience with Space Shake? What that experience was like for you going on Shark Tank, and how you managed to get a partnership with Coca-Cola.
Yeah. So the Shark Tank experience was obviously, I think the one word that comes to mind when I think about it was intense. It
Mm,
was a very intense. You must know your business. You really need to know why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and be able to articulate that very well in front of these very successful business people.
mhm,
Um, so it was definitely a true testament to like being under pressure
mhm.
and knowing those pressures, realizing if there's a step back, how do you move forward? So it kind of just taught you, it made you really think about like how you would deal with real life, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like,
Yeah.
sounds cheesy, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Pressure
But
cooker.
that grit though really like translates directly into I feel like what I'm doing today in the consulting world and like how you have to sometimes reanalyze, refocus, get back in there and then, you know, do it again. And
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. So a big transferable skill being able to, not only like think and pivot and reanalyze under pressure, but also I think your communication skills were really put to the test there as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, so that being said, you do have this really long, rich work history, and you were able to like pull back when you were making your most recent transition and look at those transferable skills that you developed throughout your career. So,
Uh-huh.
looking back at those 20 years or so of your career, what skills turned out to be like more data driven than you initially thought?
Market research for sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we have A/B testing, even budgeting and forecasting. They were actually all analytics in disguise. I just didn't label them that way until later.
Right. Yeah, then I imagine you got more in depth with like actually digging into data sources and things like that. And like, oh yeah, I've done
Mhm.
this, I've done this, I did this at Space Shake, I did this before that, I did this at my most recent job. So amazing. Mm. Okay, great. So, in addition to those transferable skills, one of the things that you brought up early on in our chat was imposter syndrome, and I feel like this is super common, not only among job seekers who are making a transition from one type of role into another, but honestly, even if you've done the same thing for 10 years and you're going to a new company, you might think like, oh, I don't know the company inside out, like you know, and they feel like under pressure. Right. So I've even worked with VPs and CEOs who have imposter syndrome. So I feel like, this is one of the things that I try to convey to the people that I work with. Like everybody is figuring it out as we go. Like we're all just kind of put on this planet and we're all just going through it for the first time right now live. So I know that that was an issue for you, imposter syndrome. So how did you like learn to tell your story in a way that you were able to like really highlight your experiences in a positive light?
I think the thing that probably resonates the most when I was interviewing is that I definitely I I explained the results. So I didn't just
Mm,
say I, grew revenue. I gave an actual number. I gave a
mm,
percentage. And how did I do that? I did that through targeted campaigns. I basically stopped listing tasks and I started showing results.
mm,
Yeah. So I just like I gave an example. I didn't just launch a product. I grew revenue by X% through targeted campaigns, and that sort of shifted my story, um, and it made the story come to life.
Right. And I feel like, me sitting in the recruiter's chair when I was sitting in the recruiter's chair, like that is something that helps me assess instantly, what your impact was.
Yeah.
And especially when I'm talking to people in the data space, like it would actually be a red flag for me if you didn't have any, data coming out of those experiences. So I think it's great that you're able to like pull back on that and reference that and be able to really shine in those interviews. Because I know that you did, like you did
Yeah.
really shine in some interviews and
Yeah.
you got pretty far
Yeah.
in one particular process, for example.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, great. And, you mentioned earlier that, you were my client. So, you and I have been working through your transition together. So what role did coaching play in helping you connect your history with your pivot into analytics?
So your coaching actually helped me reframe my career. So instead of feeling like I just had worn all these hats, right?
Yeah.
Like I learned to see myself as a strategic generalist who actually could translate data into action. So it wasn't just like, yeah, it wasn't just like I did this, right?
Mhm.
It wasn't like I was just a project manager or I was just a graphic designer or I
Yeah.
was like, I had all these other things that went into those roles.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times when there are people who have these really diverse backgrounds, there is the very real risk that you could kind of come across as kind of stumbling through your career, like moving from A to B to C without actually having any strategy or any direction and just kind of like going wherever the wind blows. So I think, something that was really important what for you was to like pull that all together and really create that story that of course was true, and you were always looking forward to the next thing and following your interests. And I think that now at this point in your career you've really like been able to pull that all together and find something that combines really all of your top skills. So I'm really excited that you landed where you did, and I can't wait to see how it continues to develop. All right. So now I would love to, talk a little bit about now that you've been through your journey, some advice that you have for job seekers. I think a lot of people see, that kind of career pivot as like a really big, scary move. I've seen a bunch of people do it and you totally rocked it out of the park. Actually, I think working with you, you were one of the fastest. You were not the fastest. In the meantime, I had another person be
Oh,
faster than
wow.
you. But you were one of the fastest people I worked with to get a job. I remember that it happened in the first month. So that being said, what would you say? What kind of advice would you give to like mid-career professionals who are looking to make a pivot right now?
I think you have to remember that you're really not starting from zero. It can be quite intimidating when you start doing these interviews and interviews are tough. Like they're nerve-wracking. And they can be hard, right? And so I think that you just have to remember that your experience is valuable. So what you've learned, you bring a lot to the table. So even though you might be pivoting into something new that maybe you don't have 10, 15, 20 years experience in, you still have your other experiences and you have to remember to, highlight those when you are being interviewed if you are pivoting to something new.
Right. And okay, and what would you say to somebody who feels like, it's maybe too late in their career to make a pivot into like data or tech? Like what would you tell
Yeah.
them?
I feel like I'm gonna sound like my grandma when I say this because I feel like she would always tell me this, but and a lot of people say it. It's never too late, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think tech does need people with diverse experiences. So, if you remember that, if you build on that, I think your background is actually your superpower, and it can definitely make you forget that too late is really doesn't exist.
So that being said, You've done so many different things in your career. You've worked with big brands, with startups, and now you're working as a
Mhm.
consultant. Which environment do you think has stretched you the most and why?
Well, I'm gonna tell you how each environment stretched me, or I guess maybe built my character a little more. So,
Yeah.
startups stretched my scrappiness. It was definitely sometimes you are looking for anything and everything in every way to get to the end, right? Um,
Mm,
so yeah, scrappiness. Big brands stretch my patience. It's often harder to be quick. There's a lot of red tape that you have to go through sometimes with bigger brands. So
mhm.
yeah, testing my patience for sure. And then I would say like consulting today actually stretches my flexibility, adaptability every single day. Like definitely have to be nimble and quick. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, yeah, adapting to those challenges every day.
Okay, great. And I would say, looking back at your experiences with all those different types of companies, I feel like you are a super valuable employee or like a candidate for new roles because, I mean, you can go into an interview for a big company like a Coca-Cola, for example, and you can say like, okay, I have this experience working in, or working in or working with big name brands. You can go into another startup and say, hey, I landed a deal on Shark Tank and, grew a company from scratch. So, and, I think those are experiences that a lot of different types of employers will be able to reach back, um, reach back to with you.
Yeah.
So, I'm not, obviously you're not ready for your next role just yet. And I know that you're looking forward to growing a lot, at your current company. But yeah, the possibilities are
Yeah.
endless.
Thanks.
So you're very welcome. And so that being said, like, where do you see yourself moving forward, like growing in your career? Where would you like to
Well,
go?
right now I'm really trying to focus on deepening my technical skills, especially in data science and machine learning, actually.
Hmm.
So I'd like to keep growing in there, in that area. And then I do like to lead. So I do see myself kind of, growing more into a leadership role once I've deepened those skills. But I do believe I need to have that before I can start leading other people. Even though I can lead them now, I can't really lead them on the technical side, and that's okay. But I have a great opportunity right now, and I'm really like focused on making sure my technical skills are up to par. And then I'd ultimately like to help mentor others who've like made pivots like mine, whether it be later in life or not even later in life. It could be earlier in their life. Just mentoring and I think helping people. That's kind of like I don't know a craving, an ultimate goal I have. So
Right. Do you have any specific plans for that?
no, working on it.
Okay. I mean, this is a great first step right now because I know that career pivoters, especially my audience, we have a lot of people in the data
Yeah,
space and people who want to move into the data space. So I think this is a great starting point for you and for them as well.
yeah, yeah. I'd reach out. I'd love to help anyone. So yeah,
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll definitely have Holly's LinkedIn profile linked at the bottom of the podcast today. And that being said, I have a question that I really like to end on, Holly.
sure.
So I am going to ask you about your hot take. So what is your hot take, and what is one common piece of career advice that you think people should actually ignore when they're trying to pivot into data or tech?
Worst advice you could probably hear is you need to start from scratch. You need to go get a degree to do something in tech. That's clearly not true because I don't have a degree. My background is not in tech. I only started recently doing it within the last year, maybe a year and a half.
Hmm.
So it's just not true that you need to start from scratch. Don't throw away 20 years of career experience. You can just reframe it. Um, and pivoting isn't about erasing your past. It's about translating it into a language of data and technology. If you like, it sounds so cheesy. Does this sound so cheesy?
It sounds fantastic. I think it's totally
Okay.
true.
If you treat yourself like a blank slate, then you're really underselling probably your biggest assets that you bring, which is all of your experiences.
Wow. Words of wisdom. Your grandma would be
Yeah.
proud. Wonderful. I agree with you 100%. Everybody has a story to tell, and it's just really a matter of framing it in the right way to make it attractive to the people who are
Yeah.
listening. So thank you so much,
Yeah.
Holly.
Cool.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, with that, I would like to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today on my podcast. And thank you so much for sharing your insights with others. I think it's going to be really even inspirational for some people who are looking to make a big pivot coming up soon. So, guys, don't be
Yeah.
afraid. Just do
Just
it.
do it. Nike did.
All right, Holly, thank you so
Yep.
much. Talk
Bye.
soon.